my hope today is for all of us kind of look at uh, how God intended work from the beginning, how it's kind of turned out because of what we call the fall, but then how we can also participate in the redemptive work that God has going on. And my hope is that we can all see our work in a little bit different perspective. I'll have some resource books at the end, and one of the best books on a biblical approach to work is Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller. And I'm going to start out with a quote from that. The gospel worldview will have all kinds of influence, profound and mundane, strategic and tactical, on how you actually do your work. Work is a major instrument of God's providence. It is how he sustains the human world. And as an extension of God's creative work, the Christian's labor has its orientation towards God himself, and we must ask how it can be done distinctively and for his glory. And boy, that's a good lens, a good filter for us to look at all of our work, I think. Well, almost without fail, whenever we meet someone, whether it's at a party or a conference, or you sit down next to somebody on an airplane, most often the first question we're asked is, what is your name? And then most often, the next question that follows is, what do you do? I find myself doing the same thing. What's your name? Fred. Oh, cool, Fred. What do you do? But in other words, it's kind of like asking, okay, justify your existence to me. What gives your life meaning and value? And sometimes our response might be met with curiosity, with interest, kind of implying that because what we do sounds interesting, then we must be interesting. And then conversely, sometimes if our answer doesn't sound intriguing, the interest wanes, and suddenly the person talking to us finds another more interesting person to talk to, or suddenly coffee seems like a great idea, and they have an urgent need to go get some. And so that implies that if our work doesn't matter to them, then we don't matter to them. Have you ever experienced this? I mean, I certainly have. Well, so the flip side of that, too, is that someone might take an interest in us only because they're curious or enamored or interested in our work, that we matter solely to them because of the work we're doing. So somehow, at least in our limited human understanding, our way of looking at things, our identity and our value are inextricably tied to our work. And my question is this how God sees us? Because the answer doesn't just address vocation, it drills down to the core of identity. At the heart of a biblical theology of identity, the root of what it means to be a human person lies the fact that humans are created beings, and human identity is first given by God. We did not create ourselves. And awareness of this created state, our creatureliness, is foundational to a biblical understanding of identity. So we're going to look at three ways, quickly, hopefully, the Bible addresses the issue of why our work matters. We're designed for work. It is how we're created. Our work has a problem. I think we all are aware, but our work also has purpose. So the first point, we're designed for work. Participating in creation is what I call that next. Yeah. When we pick up a Bible and we start at the beginning, the first 10 words immediately begin talking about work. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So in the first chapter of the Bible, we immediately see God as a worker. Not only does he work, he also delights in his work, because we read God saw all that he made, and it was very good. The heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. So like an expert carpenter who's just built a beautiful barn, God steps back. He sees what he's done, what his work has yielded. He sees himself reflected in his work. He rubs his hands and he says, man, now that was a job well done. So God works. He does excellent work, not only delights in the work while he's doing it, but he takes great joy in the results. So we see God delighting in his work, caring for the well-being of his creation, and finally creating and commissioning helpers to be participants in the forming and filling out of creation. We've said this before several times, that the Bible begins in a garden, but it ends in a beautiful city. Okay, but notice this, God did not finish the creation work by completing cities and cathedrals, museums and concert halls, hospitals and highways filled with music and art, science and architecture. He's the creator and sustainer of the universe. In him, all things hold together, but he purposely created humankind in his own image, distinct and different from everything else, to tend to the garden that he had made and to form and fill out creation. It wasn't finished. In his book, Culture Making, Annie Crouch calls this the horizons of the possible, which I love. What we make of the world using our God-given desire to do and to make something more than we were given. And as Al Walters says in his marvelous book, Creation Regained, creation is not something that once made remains a static quantity. There is an unfolding of creation. We're called to participate in the ongoing creational work of God, to be God's helper in executing to the end the blueprint for his masterpiece. We are called to help participate with God in this. So work, as Tim Keller says, work was a part of paradise. We're made to work as much as we were made to breathe and eat and drink. Work is part of what it means to be human. Work was not meant to only be utilitarian, not only for the feeding of our bodies, but also the nourishing of our souls. Work was, from the beginning, part of the fabric of our identity. So we ask ourselves, what went wrong? And next we'll talk about this. Our work has a problem, contending with thorns and thistles. Well, by the third chapter of Genesis, we're not very far into the book, we read that the first humans, Adam and Eve, even though they lived in paradise, even though they had unbroken unity and relationship with God, decided to disobey and go out on their own. And as a result of that, it distorted everything, including our work. Everything at this point has been affected. And in Genesis chapter 3, God says, "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food." So our work has been affected, as has been everything else affected. It's now painful. Our gardens, both literal and metaphorical, are now filled with weeds. Work becomes sometimes fruitless and pointless. Things don't work like they should. Things break. Crops fail from drought or flood. Plans fall apart. Jobs don't pan out. But in the midst of this, some aspects of what we call the creation mandate, the fact that God gave us a job to do, some aspects of that haven't changed. We're still created to work. It's part of our design. We're still called to form and fill creation. We just now have to do it in fields full of thorns and thistles. And because of the fall, our tendency can be to find our ultimate fulfillment in our work, not in God. And if our job is our ultimate fulfillment, then when we don't have a job we like, or if our work doesn't pay as much as we want it to, or if we're not successful, then our whole identity can plunge into crisis. And a good question for us to ask along the way is this: who am I apart from what I do? So what can we do about all this? C.S. Lewis has a quote from The Weight of Glory, and frankly, Kristen and I were talking, I could have inserted this anywhere in this talk because it's so good, but it helps describe, I think, the broken state of things, of how we're keenly aware of our distance from the way things should be, and how we're aware of things just aren't the way they ought to be, although we catch glimpses of it. So here's what he says. He says, the books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust to them. It was not in them, it only came through them, and what came through them was longing. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken, am I going too fast? Did you have to switch, or is it all on one slide? Sorry. Okay, great. But if they're mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshipers. For they are not the thing itself. They are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. So that's where we find ourselves being aware of beauty and art and God's presence in the world, but also realizing, gosh, there's distance. There's distance. So what do we do next? And that's where we come to our third point, that our work has a purpose, participating in thy kingdom come. Colossians chapter 1, it is one of my favorite books, favorite chapters of the New Testament. Tells us that through Christ, God intends to reconcile all things back to himself. And this is a beautiful way of stating these three truths. The whole world was created good. God made the world and everything in it was good at the beginning. The whole world is fallen. Sin has affected every square inch of the world. No aspect of creation is affected by sin any more or less than the other. As the saying goes, if sin was the color blue, especially people, we'd all have a little tint of blue in our skin because we're all affected by it. Yes, so I can't. I can do a Yoda, but I can't do a Smurf, and I don't know what Smurfs sound like. But the whole world, the beautiful part, the whole world is going to be redeemed. There's no part of reality, no part of creation that has been unaffected by the fall. But also, there's no part of reality where there is no hope. And here's some really great news for us. Just as we were created to participate with God in the forming and filling of creation, we're now invited to participate with God in the ongoing redemptive work of making all things new. And that invitation is there, whoever we are, no matter what our current job is. Catherine Alsdorf, former director of the Church of the Redeemer, or Redeemer Church, however it's called, the Center for Faith and Work, she puts it this way: my work is a critical way in which God is caring for human beings and renewing his world. And that's true for all of us. And by that, I don't mean that we have to constantly proclaim Jesus in the workplace. Nothing wrong with that, though. But by this, I mean that every job we do, it has the potential to serve the redemptive work of Christ. The way we work with a servant's heart committed to excellence, that all points to Jesus louder than a Jesus label on our jean jacket. And Martin Luther said it this way in this familiar quote: the Christian shoemaker does his duty not by putting little crosses on the shoes, but by making good shoes because God is interested in good craftsmanship. So how do you regard your work? Here's a question for all of us this day. Do you regard it just as a means of earning a paycheck, which is honorable enough as it is? Do you regard it as a means of providing for your family or serving other people? Do you see it as a means of serving others, pointing them to Jesus by the work you do, the excellence of the work you do, and the way you do your work? Our work like our lives, is a witness to something. Whether we're a believer or not, whether we do good work or not, our work is a witness to something, and we can't escape that. So the question again, how do we say our work? There's a story of three bricklayers working on a city street, and a fellow happens by and he asks the first brick mason doing the work, he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the guy looks at him with kind of a look of disdain, and he says, well, "Bro, I'm just laying brick. That's what I'm doing." So the fellow walks on a little further and he sees another brick mason, and he says, "Well, what are you doing?" And the second man says, "Well, I'm building this wall." And the fellow says, "Okay." And he goes on further, and there's a third bricklayer doing his work, paying close attention to what he's doing. And he asks the third bricklayer, "What are you doing?" And the man says, "I am building a cathedral for the glory of God." Same walls, same bricks, same intent, and yet only the third man saw what he was doing was for the glory of God. And that's so good. And that translates into every single job we do. And I think when we think of redemptive work, we tend to think of low-hanging fruit, Uh, this sounds like this is not lovely redemptive work. Let me make sure that we tend to think of the easy things, like people are heroic in what they do. Policemen, firefighters, people who are doing mission work, people who are on a church staff, people who might work for somebody like International Justice Mission that are rescuing victims of human trafficking and fighting against that. And all of those are great jobs, great work to do. But I have to say that the simplest and most humble of jobs done with a servant's heart, with a desire for excellence, points others to God. I've got just two little examples. There's a young man named Eli that works at the feed store where we get our feed and hay for our animals. Most of the people there, we know the owners really well. Most of the people that work there are lovely people. They all do their work well. But Eli doesn't just do his job. He doesn't just do his job well. He is bringing glory to God by the way he lifts every sack of feed and every hay bale. And without fail, every time I go into that feed store and he's there, man, he's making an extra effort to help me. He'll leave doing something that he's doing to come help me. Every single time he finishes his work. God bless you, Mr. Pierson. Good to see you. Without fail. He has such a joy of serving that just speaks so loudly of Jesus. He just can't help it. It's his posture. In 2018, we took a trip to Israel with the church, and one of the places we stopped was at the village of Nazareth, where Jesus was from, and there was this woman. They had several people doing examples of what work would have looked like in first century Israel. There was this woman who was making thread out of wool. She's working at a loom, and I wish you could see a close-up of her face, beautifully etched with lines and crags, and just a long life well lived. But this woman, the way she was doing her work, there was so much joy that not a big grin. I don't mean that. So much joy emanating from her. There was just a holiness in the place. And I don't remember, I don't want to speak for you. I was weepy because it was overwhelming, the holiness, because she was doing her work to the Lord. The most simple thing, hand making thread out of wool. And obviously it affected us greatly because we still remember all these years later, half a world away. So some encouragement here, no matter where we are right now in our lives, no matter what type of work we're doing, we can take part in the redemptive work of Christ, especially if you're in an in-between space in your life or working at an in-between job, kind of a placeholder job. We're still called to do good work as unto the Lord. Colossians 3:24 tells us, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You're serving the Lord Christ. Oh, it's so profound. And then Paul encourages us also in 1 Corinthians, in the Lord your labor is not in vain. So good. So finally, to answer the question, why does my work matter? Your work matters because you matter. It's not the other way around. Culture tells us you matter because your work matters or not. And if your identity is derived from work, then you only matter if your work matters. You're only successful if your work is successful. You only mean something if your work means something. But that is an upside down definition of work. Our work does matter, it matters very much, but it matters because we matter. At the heart of our identity given by God is the fact that we are loved. As the chorus of the Chris Tomlin song, Good, Good Father says, you're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I am loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. That's who we are. Work, yep, it's part of our makeup. It's part of our God-given identity. But our work is not where our identity is derived. Our core identity stamped on every one of us, personalized and handcrafted in each one of us, is that of being beloved by God and created with purpose and intent, with eternity in mind. I've got two quick thoughts to finish with from Tim Keller, the Every Good Endeavor. He talks about, it's toward the beginning of the book, he says, the reality is that we all want our lives to have dignity, worth, and meaning, and for our work to have the same. We want to do things that will be remembered. But if this life is all that there is, then everything and everyone will eventually be forgotten. Nothing we will have done will make any difference, and everything will come to naught. Unless there is a God. If the God of the Bible exists, and there is a true reality beneath and behind this one, and this life is not the only life, then every good endeavor, even the simplest ones, pursued in response to God's calling, can matter forever. So friends, our work matters. Amen.